would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, I thought he looked better. I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we can get over fumbles?
And Stephen A. Smith smelled blood. He didn't even have to warm up. The moment Dillon opened his mouth, Stephen A. snatched the mic and ran a 100-yard dash with it, delivering a roast so blistering that the entire NCAA media cycle had to stop and watch like kids witnessing a playground fight. Let's be honest, Dillon Gabriel has carved out a reputation for being decent. That's it, decent. The type of quarterback who can light up Tulsa on a Saturday night, but disappears when the stakes hit playoff energy.
It's possible. Those who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America, practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB.
Say it with your chest, Stephen A. That's what the timeline sounded like the second Dillon Gabriel tried to separate entertainers from competitors and accidentally put Shedeur Sanders in his crosshairs. And yes, let's get the click confirmation out of the way right now. Stephen A. Smith absolutely cooked Gabriel for those comments after a preseason outing that already had people raising eyebrows because of a pick six and a credited fumble on a botched handoff. That's the news. That's the spark. Now, let's light the fuse. Here's why this matters right now. This isn't just a throwaway press conference quip.
You first, when you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him. He showed up out on the field. You know, he played.
Stephen A. Smith did not just check Dillon Gabriel. He put the man in a cultural chokehold and made him rethink every microphone he's ever spoken into. The moment Dillon Gabriel decided to open his mouth and come after Shedeur Sanders, he didn't just misstep, he stomped straight into Stephen A. Smith's playground. And that's a neighborhood you don't walk through unless you're ready to get lit up like a cheap firework.
Heard the comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
This wasn't sports commentary. This was a demolition derby, and Dillon Gabriel was the jalopy getting flattened under Stephen A.'s sledgehammer of facts, personality, and straight-up embarrassment. Because here's the thing, Dillon Gabriel, with his highlight reel career of almost but not quite greatness, had the audacity to shame Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, who has been dragged into more media storms than Dillon's ever played in bowl games, suddenly became the punching bag for a quarterback who has yet to prove he's more than a stat compiler.
But only Dillon.
It's a referendum on how quarterbacks build credibility in 2025 between the brand you carry and the ball you spin when the lights hit. Gabriel tried to draw a bright line. There are showmen and there are grinders. But the minute he framed it that way, he wandered onto Stephen Yes stage, where the price of admission is receipts and the exit is humiliation. Stakes? Locker room perception. Media trust. A rookie's reputation on thin ice before week 1 even arrives. And because Shedeur Sanders' name lives rent-free in every highlight package and hot take roundtable, the blowback came with surround sound. Now, hold that thought, because there are a few open loops we're going to close along the way. First, we'll revisit the entertainers versus competitors line and why it backfired at the exact worst moment. Second, we'll talk about Shedeur's gravity, why his brand turns other people's comments into oxygen for him. Third, we'll look at the football, how the pick six, the fumble, and even the post-game note about a route mix-up turned into a magnifying glass on Gabriel's judgment. And yes, we're going to circle back to that Oregon shot at Coach Prime last year because this didn't emerge out of nowhere. There's a drip, drip, drip of perception shaping all of it. You'll get the receipts, the roast, and the roadmap. Let's move. Click confirmed. Public sentiment acknowledged. Fans felt like Stephen A. spoke for the room. Here's the contrarian twist. This wasn't just Stephen A. defending Shedeur. It was a masterclass in media literacy. Who gets to frame whom, and why the frame matters more than the words. Quick proof? If Gabriel's line were harmless, we wouldn't still be talking about it days later. It would have evaporated like preseason mist. Instead, it detonated. And the payoff you'll get by the end of this is simple: a clean understanding of how a single sentence can brand you for a season. Let's start with the second best point first: the football plus the microphone. Context. Gabriel opens his campaign with flashes. 8 of his first 9 completions had people nodding, then a sudden swerve, a pick six, then a credited fumble on a handoff that the head coach chalks up to a route/spacing confusion. The box score doesn't care whose feet were in which blade of grass. It reads the same on Monday morning. Application. That's exactly when you do not, under any circumstance, launch an identity lecture about entertainers versus competitors. Because now your words sit next to your tape. The best time to tell the world you're a grinder is the game after you grind a defense into dust, not the night you gift wrap 6 the other way. Framing. Expectations versus reality. We expected a hungry rookie to speak in short, declarative sentences about cleanups and corrections. We got a phrase that sounded like a subtweet aimed at the most talked about college to pro story in years. And when the room collectively hears Shedeur Sanders in that phrasing, even if you try to clarify later that you meant the media, reality doesn't care about your intent. Reality cares about impact. Pattern interrupt. Breathe. Picture the presser lights, the cameras, the mic foam an inch from your mouth. You feel that tiny tug to say something that defines you. But that tug is a trap. And Stephen A. has built a broadcast empire smoking out that exact trap. Now the strongest point. Shedeur's gravity. Context. Whether you love him or root against him, Shedeur Sanders is box office. That's not a vibe, it's verifiable. He commands clips, he commands takes, and he inherited the loudest microscope in college football and wore it like jewelry. Every throw became an episode. Every mistake a referendum. Every win an event. Application. In that ecosystem, any perceived jab at Shedeur doesn't shrink him. It frames you. You become the supporting character in the Shedeur expanded universe. Your competitor line becomes a content seed for 3 days of programming across every platform. Framing. Expectations versus reality again. Gabriel expected to draw a distinction that would center him as a no-nonsense pro. Reality answered, you just underwrote an infomercial for primetime DNA. Think about it. The very act of separating yourself from the entertainer pulled you deeper into the entertainment. Mini cliffhanger. We're coming back to the Oregon piece, hold it. First, the value loop on media power. Context. Stephen A. Smith eats impressions for breakfast. He doesn't start with data. He starts with temperature. He tells the audience what the room already feels and then builds the argument on top. Application. The moment Gabriel's quote hit the air, Stephen A. didn't just disagree. He made it costly. He pressed the history button. The league treats producers and non-producers differently. The world constantly sorts people by output. He pressed the culture button. How confidence is judged through different lenses and how that changes the way a line lands. He pressed the brand button. Shedeur's name is currency. You don't devalue currency by declaring a different standard. Framing. The bigger picture is that narrative outruns numbers. You can throw for yards, but if your timing with the mic is off, you'll get sacked by story. Quick turn. Let's close an open loop. Entertainers versus competitors. If you truly meant the media, say the media. Be surgical. There's a version of that message that wins the day. I'm here to compete. I'll let the talk shows do the talking. Period. Clean. Instead, the phrasing sounded like a silhouette. It let people project a face onto it. And because Shedeur is the face of every current conversation about swagger versus substance, a whole lot of people projected him. Which meant the thin ice became thinner when the clarification came later. The rule is simple. If they can mistake your line for a shot at the most covered prospect in the sport, they will. Own that before it owns you. Pattern interrupt. Picture the faces in your locker room hearing that line. Some guys grin. Some shake their heads. Some, the veterans, say nothing and say everything. Back to Oregon. Context. Last year, an opposing coach used Colorado's hype as his podium and poked at Prime's operation. It worked for Saturday. It did not age well. Application. That history is why audiences are hypersensitive now. Any whiff of "that wasn't about you" sarcasm gets filed under, "Oh, we've heard this song." Framing. The bigger picture. You can't control whether people hear your words through last season's speakers. You can only control what you feed the speakers. When the room is primed for a theme, vague phrasing invites the worst version. Another loop to close. The tape. Yes, Gabriel can sling it. Yes, he piled touchdowns in college. Yes, he started the night in rhythm. But the harsh truth is that resume weight moves different when your high moments haven't bent the national conversation. That's not shade, it's physics. The quarterbacks who tilt culture get graded on a curve. Everything they do is discussed at volume 11. The quarterbacks who haven't tilted culture yet don't get the curve. They get the clipboard. And that's why Stephen A. went full flamethrower, because a guy still auditioning for the lead tried to critique the star's wardrobe. It reads as envy even if envy wasn't the intention, stay with me. We're not done opening and closing loops. Locker room dynamics next. Context. Coaches protect quarterbacks publicly. Route mix-up. Wrong depth. We'll clean it up. That's standard. Application. When your coach throws a blanket over the play and you're given cover, your best move is to get small, not big. Shrink the quote. Grow the grind. Framing. Because teammates clock everything. They don't memorize your passer rating. They memorize how you handle turbulence. They want to know, can you live in the storm without lecturing the thunder? Pattern interrupt. Hard stop. Ask yourself, did anything you said make your job easier next week? Or did it feed Tuesday's debate shows while you're trying to fix Monday's film? Now, the culture thread, because it lives inside the story whether we want it to or not. Some fans watched Shedeur last week to confirm every bias about a confident black quarterback. Some fans watched Gabriel this week to see whether the standard would be equal. That's not box score talk. That's America talk. And when a line comes out that even vaguely suggests, I do the serious stuff, he does the circus, it doesn't drift into the void. It lands on all of that history. Stephen A. didn't create that context, he harvested it. He said the quiet part out loud. Producers get treated one way, non-producers another. Confidence gets read one way in one body, another way in another. And when you step into that minefield without a map, you don't get to choose which mines explode. Here's another value loop. Rapid fire.